Welcome to Radio 4. This week, we continue our retrospective of the works of Academy Award-winning writer-director Alexander Payne. Last week, we examined a dinosaur film he did some rewrites on during one of the most chaotic writing processes we've ever covered. This week, we turn to his seminal but unacknowledged work on the Robert De Niro and Benjamin Stiller comedy film Meet the Parents. And of course, next week, we'll be looking at his 2 weeks' worth of uncredited work on Detective Pikachu.
Are we actually going to? Because
No.
I'm in.
No, we won't be doing that next week. But he genuinely did do 2 weeks of writing work on the movie that he repeatedly full name checked, Pokemon Detective Pikachu. So basically, for those who don't know and are very confused right now because you've just clicked on a review of Meet the Parents and don't know why I'm pretending we're on Radio 4. Last week when we were doing Jurassic Park 3, we discovered that Academy Award-winning writer-director Alexander Payne and his frequent writing partner Jim Taylor, who's also an Academy Award winner, by the way, did extensive rewrites on Jurassic Park 3, and we thought that was the funniest thing ever, until we then discovered that the reason they got that job was that they'd done some uncredited work on Meet the Parents, and the studio had appreciated the work they'd done so much, liked it so much, they then hired them on Jurassic Park 3. So I wanted to look into this because that's the reason Chris chose Meet the Parents, and I couldn't initially find a source for any of this stuff. God, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, it was just a noise. It was
You were in agreement. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons Chris chose this. So I was like, I'm going to figure out what happened here. So I looked into it, and this is mostly information that's sourced from episode 6 of the Talking Pictures podcast, which is on HBO Max. It is still available, where Alexander Payne was interviewed, and he talked about these processes specifically. So in terms of Meet the Parents, he said, Jim and I are proud of that work. We gave them a third act. The poem he reads to his dead mother's ashes is mine to the word. So that's fully Alexander Payne's work, despite not being credited. He says, name one movie in Hollywood there's no chance Alexander Payne worked on. Jurassic Park 3 feels like it might be the leading answer. But Jim and I got that job because we'd done a good job on Meet the Parents, and they were both Universal Pictures. They'd already built the sets and were 5 weeks away from shooting when they realised they needed help. Not with the dinosaurs, but with the people. We rewrote the script in a month. So there you go. That's what happened. He then also goes on to explain that he also did, people don't know, but he does script doctoring work occasionally because he enjoys it. And Pokemon Detective Pikachu is another film he did that on. But I just wanted to clarify that right up top. I thought that was worth covering before we get into our Meet the Parents review.
That's amazing. It definitely is that sort of childhood, teenage rom-com. Like, I think we would have always got to it, but I don't know. Yeah. We wouldn't have got to it like this year. It wasn't on my radar particularly for any time soon. But I think we would have already got to it. It was definitely. It's a film I remember having on video. Like we owned this film. I owned this film. And I remember enjoying it. I remember even as a kid not overly enjoying the 2 sequels that much.
I never saw them. I never saw either sequel.
Really? Yeah. They were just a bit. Well, watch the trailer and it will tell you everything.
I did watch the trailer for the second one when I finished watching this one. It doesn't look great. It's
a bit. Hey, Dustin Hoffman. Hey, look, I mean, Robert De Niro is playing one role, Dustin Hoffman's playing another role. Like, hey, do you think that's good? Barbara Streisand. Like, it's a bit of that. And my memory is that it does the thing that, for some reason, a lot of comedy sequels do. And some, comedy films do this, and there are moments where I think this film is in danger of doing this, but it doesn't quite do it. My other memory is that it's one of those comedy sequels that just feels like a collection of sketches, as opposed to anything with a particularly tight plot or running plot or anything like that. Which feels to be a bit more of a modern comedy thing than maybe back in the day. But anyway, yeah. So this one, I've got fond memories of watching this. I think I've sat down, watched it with my parents. I remember enjoying it. That's sort of it. I don't have outstanding specific memories, but owned it on video for sure and enjoyed it. You got any similar, I'm guessing?
I had a copy of it that was from my nan's. Like, I've mentioned this before for new listeners. My nan worked at a video store, and they would get preview copies of films that weren't out yet, but they were watermarked. So, like, every 2 or 3 minutes, a watermark would scroll across the bottom of the screen. This is the property of Universal Pictures, and is not to be sold or shared in any way, whatever. And that's just eventually what would happen is those would come into the video store. All the staff would borrow it and watch it, because the whole point was that it was supposed to encourage the video store to then order lots of copies of it when it came out. But then when it actually came out, those videos were just sort of redundant, because you wouldn't rent it because it had watermarked, and it felt weird to bin it, so people just took them home. So we had a pile of these. I had so many VHSs that were fully watermarked when you watched them when I was a kid, and this is one of those. I always remember just the watermark scrolling across the bottom every now and then. It was but yeah, it was one of those feels like it was sort of like I definitely did not see this movie at the cinema. I don't even think I was particularly necessarily excited about seeing it when it did arrive on VHS, but I watched pretty much everything that way. So, like, I just gobbled up movies. So this is just one of those movies I gobbled up, really enjoyed. Definitely went back to a few more times over the years because I had that copy, that watermarked copy. So yeah, no, I just thoroughly enjoyed it as a kid. It's one of those movies that you sort of it's really well pitched, actually, because it's on that line where it feels like a proper adult comedy because of some of the themes and some of the jokes, but actually it's all written in a way that's like a bit indirect with some of the more quote unquote risky stuff, so I think a kid could watch this and not really know what they're talking about when they're talking about, Puff the Magic Dragon, or you assume drugs, but I mean, at that point when you're a kid, you just all you know is the PSA is like drugs are bad. Like, you don't know enough about drugs and you know he's not actually smoking anything, so it's like that's fine. And then the sex stuff is all pretty like innuendo-y, in like, keep the snake in the cage is like you sort of know what he means, but like it's vague enough. So this is actually a really well pitched movie, because when you're a kid you feel like you're watching an adult movie, but as an adult watching it you're like, this is fine, kids can watch this. And it's got lots of sort of maybe not quite slapstick humor, but some very obvious visual stuff that I'm sure kids loved, like the cat pooping in the ashes is that is just such a clear visual, and I think even a child would get that and find that funny. The accidentally setting stuff on fire. Some of the more slapsticky stuff that's probably there from when this was supposed to be a Jim Carrey movie. That all works quite well, I think, even for a kid. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it, even though it isn't really aimed at a young audience. We'll talk it. We'll get to my thoughts on what and how I feel about it now in a minute. But we'll move to you, Chris. So overall thoughts before we go into we're gonna spoil the shit out of and break the details of this movie down. Anything overall you want to say from your experience rewatching it yesterday?
I enjoyed it. Sorry, that sounds inherently negative. To be honest with you, I don't mean anything strongly negative or strongly positive about this movie. There are some times where I did genuinely laugh, and there are times where I was like, "This is an odd decision," and I have two outstanding examples of that, which maybe we'll get your headline thoughts and I'll then go into to kickstart the discussion. But I think a lot of the performances are really strong. I think a lot of the comedy has a real modern sensibility to it, actually. But it almost knows that too much and almost does too much of it, and is sort of got one foot in one door, one foot in the other. But I think it makes way more of an effort to have character arcs and stuff like that than a lot of the movies do at the time. But equally, that doesn't necessarily mean that there are spectacular character arcs for any one character. I would pay it the compliment that I think it gets the job done. I think what they were trying to achieve with this film, they achieve. There's not. Let's compare it. I preferred it, for example. We've done Johnny English this year. I think I preferred it to Johnny English for sure. I think it's a more even film. I think I genuinely think I laughed more. But it's not like it ended and you go, oh, that was hilarious. That was spectacular. Hey, there are good things. There are bad things. Solid. I'd say it was a solid movie. If you like rom-coms, I would recommend it. And I think if part of the premise of this film is, if part of the premise of this podcast is, what do we think of something with a reflective modern lens? There's definitely things I didn't notice the first time, like the sheer dismantling of the Greg character, and how he slowly becomes more, unkept and more uncouthed and is really quite broken by the end of the film.
Yes.
And actually, it's a really, really strong performance from Ben Stiller. Yes, I think everyone, there is subtlety and nuance. Oddly, there is nuance in everyone's performance. Like, you could watch this film and in each scene watch a different person, and they're all reacting as characters, not the film. So a good example of that, and sorry, I'm rambling and going into slight specifics here, but a good example of that is the scene where it's revealed where De Niro's character is making the cat the ring bearer. If you look at the other older guy, which I can't, is that the fiance's parents, or is that just their friends? I can't really remember.
Yeah, I couldn't quite place them. I assume the fiance's parents, but like, who knows?
Yeah, but that guy, the son is like sat there like just non-pulsed, like, fucking hell, I think my dad loves the cat more than me. The other friend, let's assume for the purpose of this it's the fiance's parents. The dad of that is going, oh, you kid, like he's like, oh, come on now, this is too far. Like, but that's not relevant to the plot of anything. The movie doesn't need him to react like that. It's like early on when Greg says he prefers dogs and the mum mouths me too. Like, that's a reaction of the mum. Like, that's not for the movie, it's for the character. And that makes the characters inherently feel a bit more fleshed out than perhaps another movie of its nature. So I think there's things to compliment, there's things to criticize. It's a movie. It sounds, I know that sounds weird, but I think we've definitely reviewed worse comedies, and we've probably reviewed better comedies. But it wasn't a chore to sit through. I was happy to sit through it. What did you think?
Yeah, very similar, I think. I think my compliments are tepid ones. My criticisms are tepid ones, in that, like, nothing this movie does is fully, like, spectacular. You must see this. Get out there and do it now. Nothing this movie does wrong is like, oh my God, don't go anywhere near this. It's a nightmare. So it just sort of falls into this really quite happy medium where it's like, yeah, it's enjoyable. Like, the ideas are good. The execution is, adequate to good. Like, there's parts you're going to really enjoy. Elements of it feel slightly rushed, but, like, nothing is ever, like, the movie just really just functions. And that is, like, such a strange place to be, because very often this is a show of extremes. A lot of the films from our youth are either aging really horribly or are still masterpieces, and it's just it's always really interesting when something lies in the middle. Harder to review, I will say, but it always really interesting when it lies in the middle. I think overall, to sort of do some overall thoughts that are more specific to the film, when the movie is, like, sort of overtly trying to be funny, I think sometimes it misses, but I think that might be a matter of taste. I think I got out of this, or what I enjoyed out of this, was the more subtle and awkward conversational moments that are designed to create tension or light amusement. They seem to just land like clockwork. Like it's surgical sometimes. How simple lines designed to do that are really, really effective. Could you milk me, Greg? Is just such a, like, you put that on paper. It's kind of funny, I guess. You give it to Robert De Niro in this context, and the context of what these conversations are. The way the tension ramps up, the way the awkwardness ramps up, is actually really, really good. It does sometimes feel like a feature film version of a sitcom script, where it's like escalating for silly reasons that are like lots of mix-ups and confusions, which I like less. I don't like his suitcase being delivered and it's someone else's suitcase. It's not funny to me.
They also didn't really do anything with that.
No, because it seems like minutes later, he without us ever actually seeing a scene that explains it, he just seems to know that it wasn't his suitcase. So there's stuff like that I don't love. There are certain jokes that are a little bit dated. I don't like any of the male nurse stuff. It doesn't work for me at all. Even in the 90s, that's an out-of-date joke in my opinion. You could argue the character arcs are a bit thin, but them being thin means the ending happens quicker than it seems like it should. Like, it's so funny because I paused the movie. I was like, there are 28 minutes left of this movie, and we're at the low point. Presumably 5 to 10 minutes of what's left of this movie is credits. We've got a lot to resolve in a short space of time here. And the movie did it, and I expected to be mad at the movie did it in that time and be like, that was rushed. But it wasn't, and what I realised was the situation was so derived from simple misunderstandings and characters not just saying the obvious thing that would resolve this conflict, because obviously that would end the plot immediately. That actually, when you do want to end the plot, you resolve the misconceptions, the miscommunications, and then you just have the characters apologise for the obvious shitty way they've behaved on both parts. Because ultimately, this is a movie about... Greg makes a series of very, very terrible decisions, but he does that because of the needless pressure that is put on him to exist and live up to the expectations of his girlfriend's father. And both men are at fault. Those expectations are obviously going to drive a person absolutely mad and make them panic and maybe lie. You still shouldn't lie. So both characters are sort of in the wrong, but it's quite a simple idea. So you sit them down and have them have a conversation, and you've resolved this plot in 30 seconds. And it does sort of make you go, these two people should have sat down and had a more honest conversation from minute one. But you don't begrudge it because, like I said, it functions. There's nothing wrong with it. It just happens quicker than you'd imagine it would. And when that happens, you go, oh, it's because this plot is really simple. And like a sitcom premise, actually probably could have just been resolved much quicker if these characters had just had a sit down. And that is true of a lot of sitcom scripts too. So, and the fact they make that work over a sort of hour and 40 minutes. What is this movie? 2 hours? I actually didn't look. It breezed by well enough.
I think it's it's like an hour 50, hour 47.
Sure.
Something like that.
Yeah, fine. Oh yeah, you go down 48. Perfect. You were very close. Wow, you were 1 minute off. That's impressive. So I enjoyed it. I'm going to say recommend. I think this is, if you have fond memories of this movie. Also, I think a lot of it's kind of weirdly iconic now. Like the cat on the toilet is pretty iconic. The poem, the poem. Fuck me, it's a poem. So a lot of the ideas in this movie are solid, really good, and it's executed so well that it well enough that it just totally works. And you'll laugh, you'll enjoy the journey the characters on, you'll feel satisfied by the end. It's as you said, it's a movie. It's a enjoyable movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, and I would also. I think I said, but I might not have done actually. I would also recommend. So two good examples of for me to kickstart us into deeper, which full spoilers from here on out. Because usually, to be fair, we spoil things up top. But I guess this is also a movie that's called Meet the Parents.
Well,
they're not going to get on, and by the end of the movie, they get on.
Yeah.
So I suppose you can't really spoil this movie.
Yeah, we always try to not spoil movies, but sometimes it is hard when you're doing a review like this. But we try to at least give our recommendation before we start spoiling it, and we don't always succeed or remember to do that.
So we'll start spoiling now. So I think one of the best examples, and clearly for you, the poem is up there. For me, one of the best examples of the awkward conversational. Well, actually, while I remember, let me say what I really like about the poem, because again, it's such a perfect example of what you were saying, of like almost like the lightness of the way some of the really funny lines are thrown away, and it's really good writing, but more than anything, also good performance.
Yes.
Like my favorite bit of the poem is he does this really, like obviously we're assuming as well that people have seen it recently enough or remember it, but he does a really kind of bizarre poem about his deceased mother, and Greg just says something like, "Yeah, that was beautiful and a lot of information."
Yeah, I've actually got the line in front of me because I pulled it. I was pulling up the poem. So he reads the poem, which, by the way, just for listeners who don't know, it has sentences in it like, to his mother, "I selfishly tried to hold on to you while the cancer ate away at your organs like a rebel force." It's fucking madness. But Greg says, so Pam says, "Dad, that's beautiful." And Greg replies, "Yeah, that was so beautiful. And yet, had so much information."
Yeah. So good.
It's great. It's really good.
And for me, the one was also very much the Puff the Magic Dragon conversation.
Yes, it's great.
Like
it's
between them
funny.
in the car. And that's when I was like, oh, the fact that you have got Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller is really paying off in spades here. Because that scene was so good and just so funny and so enjoyable. Just everything from... They both play it with such conviction.
Yes.
And it was wonderful.
And that's not to say, I would say just very quickly, and that's not to say it's not written well. Also, I mean, it's a very, strongly executed joke. It's a good joke. It's a good scene on paper. It's a good scene, but you take a good scene and then you give it to these amazing actors, and it's like. It really helps what would have otherwise been an amusing scene and makes it become a hilarious scene. You know what I mean? Like that's when the movie's actually like at its best, it's when those two things are really, really coming together as strongly as they do a few times throughout. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. By the flip side, one of the things I noticed about this movie is, and there's no scene worse for it than the dinner scene, right? Which is a really good scene. And a funny scene, but sometimes it was like the makers of this movie went, that works, let's play it. So basically, I'm watching this dinner scene, like, and on the one hand, you could make an argument that it is effective because of this, and it helps you like learn the characters and all of that sort of stuff. But we do. So first of all, is him saying grace, which is funny, but
yes.
And the joke is someone is doing something that is awkward, and the other characters don't know how to react, and they do that, and then the next thing that happens is he reads the poem, and the joke of that is someone is doing something awkward, and the rest of the characters don't know how to act. And I'm watching it going, oh wow, they've done the exact same joke twice, and both versions of the joke are funny.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm surprised no one in the room went, aren't we sort of doing the same thing here? Yeah. And then they do the milking stuff, and Greg is going into detail about and trying to justify, and someone is saying a big awkward thing, and the rest of the characters don't know how to react. And again, the poem, as we pointed out, is brilliant. Ben Stiller's just digging of the hole to the point where he's miming milking a cat is also hilarious and very funny. Yeah. And just the amount of time they let the grace thing go on for is also very funny. It's that trick of like...
It's understanding as well. In that one, I'd say that the joke is actually more... with that one, it's not that they don't know how to react. They do know how to react. They just don't know whether to call him out. And that's what's so good about that one, I think, is because... And what separates that one from the other two. The other two is just like no one knows what to say to that. Because that, you've either done a weird grace or you've done the weird poem. But then with that one, it's more like, I think everyone around that table knows he must be bullshitting. So it's just a question of who's confident enough to call him out, and obviously that ends up being Robert De Niro's character, which is that brilliant. Where you can milk just about anything. Could you milk me, Greg? Which is just one of the greatest lines in the whole movie. Just full stop. Could you milk me, Greg? Is amazing.
Later on, when Pam calls him out on it as well, and she's like, well, clearly we didn't talk about a lot of things. I didn't know about your milking days.
Yeah. Well, also, my favorite is when in the more openly hostile part of the movie later, when the two characters are actually a bit more openly and have that open animosity to each other, and Robert De Niro at one point in this movie gets to yell the sentence, "You tried to milk him, you sick son of a bitch."
Yeah,
when his cat goes missing. So good.
And this is what I'm saying. And I think it lends itself to your point. Because again, I'm not criticising any of those bits. They're all really strong bits.
Yeah,
but in terms of what you said, of it's sometimes feeling like a sitcom that someone has gone, let's make a sitcom episode a movie. Mm-hmm. In a sitcom, it would be one of those things. But they basically do the same joke. And it helps you fully feel the awkwardness. It helps you fully feel the tension. It is all effective. But it was just my experience watching it of going, oh, this is the same joke again. Oh, fucking hell, this is the same joke for a third time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's great. We've been joined by Nadia. Hi, Nadia. Hello. She says hello. She's come to get objects from the room.
While I've named, I don't have the document. While I've named Terry Polo, Dan, do you want to know about an amazing rabbit hole I went down? I lost my mind going down a rabbit hole.
I'm fascinated. Would this be can I quickly check? Is this to do with Naomi Watts?
No.
Okay, then carry on. Because I've got something to do with Terry Polo and Naomi Watts that's in my trivia. But I'm fascinated by your rabbit hole. What happened?
I wanted to see whether we could create a theme for this series of Rewound reviews, because I'm watching it and I'm like, and I basically do exactly what I did the previous 2 episodes ago, which is I'm watching it and I'm like, hey, Terry Polo, because I'm currently I have a young child. And you can't necessarily watch something you need to concentrate on. So my sort of throw it on, settle them down late in the evening television has just been rewatching through The West Wing. And for those that don't know, she plays Matt Santos' wife very well, Helen, in the later seasons of The West Wing, and that's where I am. So I'm like, hey, West Wing, and I'm like, hey, I did that the other week with the Lost World when it was Richard Smith. I was like, hey, West Wing. And I was like, who else has been on the West Wing? And then I was like, oh well, Laura Dern was in the West Wing as well. She was in an episode as the Poet Laureate. And obviously with Laura Dern, you've got Jurassic Park 1 and Jurassic Park 3. And then I'm like, oh, that's 4 movies. 4 of the movies we've chosen this year have had West Wing alumni in. I wonder if I can find some more West Wing alumni. So I went through that.
Oh my god.
And let me tell you, Ghostbusters was a challenge. But
did you find
I fucking found someone. I found someone. I can't remember who it was, but I found someone. They played like a reporter in an episode of The West Wing. Do you want to know the one that stumped me?
Go on.
Johnny English. Could not find anyone in Johnny English that had been in The West Wing.
That's a shame.
But yeah, I was gutted.
Yeah, that is sad. I feel for you.
Because I was going to be like, because then when you were going to make your choice, I was going to be like, well, Dan, let me tell you, it better have someone that's been in the West Wing.
Well, I was, I know what I'm choosing, and I'm just glancing, and I'm not sure. I'm not immediately seeing it on anyone's CVs.
Well, it falls apart because of Johnny English. But the fact that it didn't, and to be fair, Johnny, afterwards, I was like, oh, Johnny English is British, so, from the same time it was airing, so... unless it was a big name or something like that. But I was surprised to find
Johnny
someone.
English, not Johnny English. Sorry, West Wing connections in all of our movies.
Yeah, let me just.
Have you got the list?
Just check my list to see. Yeah.
Very impressive.
But I don't know. I don't know if I would have.
I'm currently checking to see But yeah.
Did I keep the list? Because I think I was so disappointed by Johnny English. I did, right. So yeah, Ghostbusters had someone called France Turner in it, who was in both. Meet the Parents has Terry Polo. Jurassic Park 1 and 3 has Laura Dern.
Yep.
The Lost World has Toby. And then it was. I don't think. Maybe there's another movie I didn't get to checking because I'd got to Johnny English and had got stumped by that point. But yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the movies do. And yeah, we're nearly at the end. So what else have we done this year?
I'm currently checking the cast for the next movie I'm choosing.
Let me check let me see what else we've done. I can get that up. Hold on.
Do I have that anywhere near? No, not near.
That's alright, I've got it
near.
near.
No, I don't think it's not looking good for the next one either, I'm afraid. Unless you're better at searching this sort of stuff than I am.
Well, for Ghostbusters, I clicked on everyone. And, well, maybe not because I don't know how quickly I found him, but certainly for Johnny English, I clicked on everyone that was in that movie and checked their IMDb.
Right. Yeah, well...
Wait, I was checking uncredited people.
Okay, so at least amongst the main cast of my next selection, there is no Western connection.
I've not made. Sorry, I missed an obvious one. Grease, obviously, Stockard
Channing. Yeah, and of course you didn't act out. You did at the beginning, but when you repeated, you didn't mention obviously Richard Schiff and Jurassic Park 2.
Yes, and so the only one I didn't check because I got stumped at Johnny English.
Yep.
I haven't checked Hercules.
Oh yeah, of course Hercules. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, we'll take a look, I guess, when we talk about next week's film. But that is very funny. What a weird rabbit hole to fall down.
To say though, to say on that, because it's bound to be said at some point on this. She's great in this. She's brilliant. She does I think she does a really good job of selling everything she needs to sell. Like, for example...
While you're talking, I'm going to go shut the window, because you may be able to hear. There's a dog next door that's barking up a storm. 1 sec.
A good example is her reactions to Kevin, the ex-boyfriend. You absolutely know as an audience member that she doesn't have any feelings for him and doesn't still fancy him. But you also absolutely know when Greg's looking at her and seeing the expression on her face why he would get jealous and feel that way. And, that's not an easy line to walk as a performance. You absolutely know that she loves her dad, but also feels that he can be a bit overbearing, but also thinks that some of Greg's behaviour is absolutely mad. And she just walks everything the scene needs her to do and feel, she does. And I think that's probably true of everyone in the cast, But we're talking about Western connections at this moment. So yeah, to shout out Terry Polo, I think she does a brilliant job in this movie.
Yeah, I would agree. I think she's got a bit of a thankless role because her character doesn't get to be particularly funny. Her character doesn't get to be particularly involved in the more awkward reacting to Greg's insanity moments because she's supposed to be the supportive partner for a lot of the movie. So she's sort of stuck in arguably the least interesting grounds as an actor to be in. This is probably the movie's least exciting material to be handed. But she does do a really good job. When she says, I wrote the line down actually. Let me see if I get it. I was never in love with Kevin. I am in love with you. She really delivers that in a very, very convincing way. And you do believe their relationship throughout this film. And I do think she's a big part of the reason that's happening because, as we've pointed out, Greg is unraveling. So what Ben Stiller needs to be doing is unravel. So you need to understand and you need to believe that there is a relationship worth saving in this film. So that's down to her, ultimately. And the script, obviously. But, in terms of acting, in terms of what her performance is doing, she is the reason you believe in that relationship. So without that, the movie definitely falls apart a lot more than than it ultimately does. She's a big part of what makes this movie work. She's great. She's really good. So yeah, I'm also gonna sort of give her a high five if I ever see her for her thankless role in Meet the Parents.
Well, I imagine I don't know for sure because it's been so long since I've seen them, but I imagine the role is even more thankless in the later films where they're stuffing the cast full of more people and characters.
Right? Yeah, probably also true. Yeah, that is probably also true. But no, she's great in this. She is great in this. She's got, and she doesn't feel like and this is, I think this one is maybe down more to the writing, but as a character, she's not written as the usual sitcom partner. She's not like, oh, you guys always getting into trouble and shenanigans. Will you guys just stop that? Shaking her finger. She's not that either. And I think that's thank Christ, because the movie definitely doesn't need that also. That's for sure. So yeah, I'm with you. I like that, but I like that stuff too. In terms of the pacing, then, did you think that the final act sort of happens a bit quickly, but it kind of gets away with it? Because that was where I landed.
Yeah, it's difficult on paper, yeah, but actually, they play out that scene very well. And the scene between them is nice. So, I'll tell you my problem with the final. Here's my problem with the final act. Actually, it's not fucking clear at all whether Robert De Niro's character got him kicked off the plane, and I really think it should have been Robert De Niro's character that got him kicked off the plane, but the way he's behaving on his own fucking accord, it's the bit where he goes, "Did you do this? Did you get me kicked off the plane?" You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? You yelled at the stewardess and then started talking about bombs.
Yeah, yelling about bombs on a plane.
I think it would have been so much better if the bag had fit and someone had come on and said, "Oh, the bag's too big. You've got to leave the plane." And he'd be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" "No, it's not. Look, it fits." And yeah, you can't do he's at his limit when it comes to checking the bag. But again, that probably still works. Oh, the bag's too big. You need to check it into the hold. Well, I'm not doing that. Look, it fits. No, it doesn't. You need to check it into the hold. Well, I'm not doing that. Check it rouge, all of that shit. Make that cleaner. That was my bigger problem with the third act.
Yeah.
I felt they tried to. Yeah, they tried to have their cake and eat it with that. They tried to make it seem like, oh, look at all the power he has. He's found out where he is and he's got him kicked off. But also, they tried to also do, this man's reached such a low point that he's just, behaving so irrationally now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think your suggested fix would completely resolve that. 100%.
Yeah. And I think the actual scene of them sitting down and the parallels between the lie detector test then, the lie detector test earlier, the looping back round to he's a human lie detector, all of that sort of stuff was effective. It works.
Yeah, it sort of covers a huge amount of unsaid stuff quite quickly and in a way that doesn't feel quick. It sort of feels earned. Again, probably highlights how simple the conversation needs to be. I will say I do not feel like the movie 100% commits to what it should at the end in terms of Jack acknowledges fault also, but he never we never outright say the sentence, "Yeah, Greg acted insane, but he did that because of the absurd amount of pressure you put on him." We round that with sentences about Greg feeling under pressure and, Jack being the source of that, and then Greg's obvious behaviour being talked about quite a lot. But we never actually string the three ideas together to make it a coherent sentence at any point in the movie, and I feel like it probably could have used that, because that is what's happening, and the movie isn't quite willing to fully outright acknowledge Jack's wrongdoing in as direct a way. It's always indirect. Greg's misbehavior is always really directly addressed. He is lying. He has done this. He has done that. Jack's misbehavior is always talked around. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know if I necessarily fully agree with it. When during the human lie detector at the end, Greg says, quite frankly, I don't know if I can be a part of this family because of you, because I'm terrified. So he's like acknowledging, as much as I love Pam, you are a barrier here. Pam gets the scores for whatever that test is from Greg's mum, and goes and confronts her dad and calls her out on, here you go, she's got his SATs too as well if you want them. He says, okay, well, if I agree to be a bit less interfering and calm down a bit, will you marry her and be a part of the family? So I think
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying they hit the idea, but they never string it together. So those are all three separate facets of what Jack is doing, but no one ever clearly outright says and actually ties the two ideas together, which is your behavior has directly caused Greg's behavior. Greg's acting crazy because you have done this. Because that's the problem. It's the movie doesn't want to let Greg off the hook. So it never quite feels comfortable putting any fault at Jack's door in a direct way for Greg's choices. And I do think Jack is not 100%, because obviously Greg is an adult who's making calls for himself, but the reason he's so panicked and flustered and feels like he needs to lie is because of the pressure he gets put under. And while the movie is happy to go, you put him under pressure, it never follows it up with, and that's why he's acting like a fucking lunatic. And that's what I'm talking about. It never, and I even said it in my original thing before you responded, that the ideas are there. They're just, no one ever actually like threads it into one sentence. You know, for you to make your point there, you went to 3 different scenes or 3 different lines. So yeah, because even the wife at one point, even I've forgotten the actress's, the character's name, Dina. Or Diana. No, Dina. Dina Barnes. Pam's mum, she also, sort of in a roundabout way admonishes Jack for being a bit hard on him. But again, they never quite pull the trigger on. And I feel like I understand why you don't do that in the middle of the movie, because you want to get us to the point where we unravel all of his lies in front of everyone and have him humiliated, have the lowest point at the end of the second act. But after we've done that, I think we can acknowledge the cause and effect that's occurred here, in my opinion.
And actually, I think Pam's a little bit to blame as well. Like, not telling him until they arrive that they don't live together. Yes. There's enough hints that the gift is related to being a florist, and she knows that's not going to mean anything because he wasn't really a florist. And I feel like she could have done a bit more pre-warning of, oh yeah, he's a bit intense, by the way.
Yeah, and also we're going to spend this weekend to attend my sort of sister's wedding. Oh, my ex is definitely going to be there. Would have been nice for a heads up on that too, so we're not adding to it. And I think the director of this film, whose name currently escapes my brain, Jay Roach, did want this to be essentially an anxiety dream. This film. Like your worst possible nightmare of meeting your girlfriend's parents playing out, where you couldn't possibly fuck up more. You flood the garden, you lose the cat, you set fire to the altar. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it could not possibly, you break the urn with your with your potential, families, the urn with their grandmother in it. Like, if the marriage happens, they're going to be related to you by law, and you're doing all this stuff. It's insane, right? And I think Pam's choices add to that for sure, and add to the comedy and add to the situation of it. But yeah, it doesn't exactly paint her in a great light either. But that
the anxiety thing then is clearly why there's so much attention on the nicotine gum. And,
yes.
The intensity in which he's chewing it. Because did you think, surely at some point he's going to get the shits here?
That genuinely didn't occur to me. I did wonder if it was setting up a another lie to add to the pile, because I think early on she says, you don't smoke. So he's like, it's a lie that if Jack was to find it out that he was on nicotine gum, he would know he'd be like been trying to get off the smoke because he does smoke, that he'd been hiding that. I thought maybe they were going to play that as another sort of mini lie by omission of Greg's, but they don't ever go down that route. I did enjoy, truthfully, the way I hate the joke Gaylord Fokker. It's a bad joke. It's not funny. It's just crap. I do like what it does for the story, though. Revealing that he's got a different legal name, therefore previous searches... The reason they hadn't turned up his test results was not because he lied, because the guy has lied so much, you as an audience member do believe it's true he may have lied, until the moment he looks her in the eye and says, no, I did, when he's confronted about it later. You genuinely don't know if he took those tests or not, or if it's just another thing he's lied about. And even though the dumb joke of what his name actually is, the premise of I've got a name I'm so embarrassed of I've hidden it, and that's why you couldn't find my test results, is quite good. I think that all works really well.
One element of the joke, because I agree with you about the central premise of the joke, but one moment that I couldn't help but laugh about is the brother Danny's reaction, because again it's the nuance, and it's not him laughing, that's almost a little cruel, but it's just the subtleties in the throwaways. And as it cuts back to Greg looking all annoyed getting in the car, I absolutely laughed at Danny going, I mean, it's just not a normal name. Like, that delivery really did make me laugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's so absurd though. It's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. His delivery is good, but I didn't find any of that stuff. Same with the male nurse stuff. I didn't find much of that very funny.
Oh yeah, that stuff is aged horribly.
Yeah, just like isn't that traditionally isn't that a woman's job? Usually, like I think it's interesting because. I don't know. I'd like to get into the heads of the. I would like to interview the people who wrote this movie. Not the uncredited rewrites, but like the actual guys who worked on it, which are. Oh wait, that's interesting. There's some extra names here that I don't recognize from my research. So I've got. I see. Yeah. So it's the original couple that wrote the film that this was a remake of. Oh yeah, this one's a remake, by the way. We'll talk about that in a minute. Jim Hertzfield and John Hamburg, who wrote this screenplay, and not together. They did different drafts at different times. I would love to sit down and ask them about some of these choices, because so the nurse stuff, right, is played as actually, or you could potentially read it as actually. It's something for me to latch onto with Greg's character, so I know he's not a complete piece of shit. Because obviously, I'm watching this movie. If I'm judging these characters. Greg lies and lies and lies and lies, right, throughout this movie. And he's my central character, right? So you've got to sort of empathize with him, right? So what you have to do is a couple of things. You have to give him some humanizing elements, and you have to make sure we truly understand from behavior and what's happening that he's been pressured into this by the circumstances. We talked about that ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go back into that. Jack's element of why he does what he does. So it's like, what do you do to keep the character, to give you something to latch onto with the character? And one of the things I think I inadvertently latched onto, and I don't know if it's intent or not, but one of the potentially positive outcomes of the male nurse stuff is it does give you it does increase my liking of Greg. Because he's unfazed by it. He's proud of his work. He's happy to be doing what he's doing in spite of all the judgment. And it makes me like that character more. Because he's getting it in the neck and he doesn't care. Because he's got a job that brings him satisfaction. And that's more valuable to him than a job that pays crazy well. He doesn't need a portfolio.
And that
endears you to him, I think. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, the scene where Kevin assumes he's like he assumes not high up, but assumes he's got a more corporate role in the industry, and Greg's just like, no, I'm a nurse, I help people. Like that scene's a really good example of that. His reaction to Kevin, and the goading from from Robert De Niro's character, whose name escapes me in
Jack.
this moment. Jack, yeah, and the goading from Jack, and he just doesn't refuses to be baited because in his head there's nothing to bait him for. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it does. So there is and it may even have been the intent, and maybe I'm just mad that the movie reinforced some unfortunate views that a lot of people had at the time to make jokes about male nurse. That's funny, but I guess the positive outcome of it is it does strengthen. It does strengthen Greg's character, and maybe that was the intent from the off, and it works better than I gave it credit for. But that element of it works really well. Very quickly, while we're on the topic of Kevin's character, I'd forgotten Owen Wilson was in this movie completely, and when he sees the picture of them on the shelf, I went, oh. And it all just came sort of flooding back to me. Such a perfect role. Now, I believe he ad-libbed a bunch of his lines, and you can kind of believe it, because it just feels otherwise it was just written too perfectly for him. But my God, is it good. My God, is he good in this movie. He is a perfect. And they don't go and make him one thing that we're going to cover Mrs. Doubtfire on this podcast at some point. And we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to have a conversation about 90s partners when the main person has split up when our main character has been split up with the new partner of their flame, the one we're supposed to hate, is made villainous, truly villainous, way too often in 90s movies. Like a full on you think they're okay, and then at the end it's like, I'm just trying to get in their pants, and you're like, oh, okay, so you're an absolute piece of shit, right? It's easy. That's very easy to do. I respect it way more when a movie from this era, and admittedly this is like 2000s, early 2000s, but like this era at all, where they make him not a pleasant person, but they don't make him a villain. Yeah, he's really obnoxious. He's kind of trying a bit too hard. But he's not like a bad guy outright. Do you know what I mean? He's not secretly kicking kids into lakes. Do you know what I mean?
With the exception of absolutely stitching him up on those swimming trunks. He's in regular swimming shorts later.
See, okay.
He's blatantly doesn't need to give him those tiny Speedos.
Let's talk about that for a second, because let me tell you, I don't think he got stitched up there at all. I was like, fucking hell, show off what you got, Mr. Stiller. He's looking good.
He did look good at yeah. I was like, fucking, ooh, he's got some muscles.
Yeah, that's a well-toned man. Who knew Ben Stiller was hiding a bit of a bod? Who knew? Yeah, he's in good shape, really good shape. So I don't think he stitched him up at all. I think he did him a favour.
Fair. I don't quite know why they all insisted he changed before seemingly... The order in which they did things at that party,
yes.
Actually thinking about it, is mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
He got changed, then they ate food, and then they played volleyball.
Yeah, I found that really strange as well. And I mean, they only did it that way for the joke to work. Because if he'd have just got... Because everyone, when they're playing volleyball, they're all in, proper swimmies and, much more sort of, quote-unquote, revealing outfits. A lot more skin showing. So, if he'd have gone and eaten first, I guess that is really actually the real way that Owen Wilson's character, Kevin, stitched him up, was telling him to change before the food instead of after.
It is a great shot of where he's looking at the trunks. The changing bit, and just throws the gum packet down. It is the slow unraveling of that character, and Ben Stiller's performance within that is brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. Very quickly on some of the little notes I've got. The title sequence is fine. It's a little cheesy. I don't know if we needed to do that, but all the sort of footage of Terry Polo, it's yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. I didn't mind it.
No. The footage was supplied by her actual husband at the time. They're divorced now, but the footage came from her husband, so I guess it makes sense.
Oh wow! I think there was a nostalgia for me because, obviously as a young man, just fell in love with Terry Polo on this movie. So maybe there's a slight sense of nostalgia for that montage.
That makes sense. That does make sense. We've already covered that. I do like that the movie gets going quite quickly. We have the abandoned marriage proposal outside the school, and then we're just pretty much on our way to the parents. Like we don't mess about. Like the movie doesn't waste any time, and I really respect it for doing that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All the dialogue is really well written because it has to walk a line between normal conversations and outright hostility for most of the movie. There is a point when there's a switch flicks and the characters can be more openly hostile to each other. But prior to that, actually, that is a really impressive balancing act. When two characters can be sort of passive-aggressive to each other or like prodding each other in ways that could otherwise be interpreted as just normal chit-chat. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, even down to like, could you milk me, Greg? Strictly speaking, there's nothing hostile in that question other than that he's pulling him up for something strange he said. I also really enjoy, as a good example of that as well, when they're doing the whole Greg hates cats things, and Jack says, it's not that I don't like cats. It's just, Greg says, it's not that I don't like cats. It's just that I prefer dogs. And he goes, oh, so you prefer an emotionally shallow animal, which is just an amazing line of dialogue. Because again, it's not openly hostile, but it is kind of hostile.
It's later on as well when when they're chatting in the car and Greg's trying to make small talk and he's just like, why don't you like cats, Greg?
Yeah. It was great. And again, that's one of the film's greatest strengths is its dialogue, in my opinion. Do you think... Okay, let's talk about the spy stuff, right? Because I'm not sure... It's like... Sometimes I feel like the movie is treating Jack's real job... or original real job, like a mystery. But at other times, I feel like the movie's just like not too fussed about that. Because it's not subtle from minute one that it's pretty obvious straight away that he's not what he says he is. For a number of reasons. I mean, you could probably, if you go to the first act of this movie, you could probably fish out 3 or 4 scenes that pretty clearly earmark what we're doing with that character later, and then we have the quote-unquote reveal when Greg finds the Nook. But the movie doesn't even treat that like it's a big reveal. It's just like, oh yeah, by the way, he was a spy for the CIA.
No, it doesn't, because there's no point, because really, he should be told then by Jack. Like, that's when he should be told. It's so weird that he's then told by Pam, and then Jack, is above his bed when he wakes up and all that bollocks. Right. Like, absolutely, those scenes play out it's... And it almost feels a little lazy. It almost feels like, it's a comedy. You'll know the premise going in. And therefore, you'll know this twist.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like the polygraph test thing is such a great idea, but actually I will say as a scene, it sort of builds tension, but then doesn't really know what to do with it once it successfully builds tension. Like that scene just sort of ends. It's not very satisfying. Like there's no big joke or payoff. He's just asking him increasingly unfortunate questions, and then on one of the questions that you're like, oh, I can't wait to hear how he answers this, we just cut away to the next day. And Greg's like, yeah, I'm fine, except for the polygraph your dad gave me. And it's like, yeah, well, I kind of wanted to see that play out, like, to be honest. I mean, it's a funny scene. It just doesn't really, it's like they didn't know what to, they were pleased with the idea, but they didn't really know what to do with it. But they were able, because they're, as they are in the rest of the movie, they were able to build tension with it. They just didn't know. And look, don't get me wrong, I don't know the answer to what you do to pay that off or end that scene. But something has to happen other than it just very abruptly stopping, to be honest. But that's just me.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Because we talk about this movie sort of in some places, arguably, we talk about the sequels arguably being, series of sketches. I think there's an element of that to this. You can sort of set pieces, sketches. There's the he burns the house down sequence. There's the lost cat sequence. That you can argue this is like a sketch. I've lost my potential new in-laws.
Yeah.
Cat. my potential in-law is sat me down for a lie detector test. Each of these could be considered a sort of sketch. And I think one thing Chris and I learned very quickly when we did our sketch show at Edinburgh Fringe was that sketches, if you have a funny idea for a sketch for the build-up, you really still need to go out on a big joke. It can't just lame duck at the end where it's just like, right, well, that joke is over now. You have to have a punchline. There has to be some sort of either big gag or big reveal to end the sketch, because otherwise, no matter how funny the rest of the sketch is, it just doesn't go anywhere and the whole thing feels flat.
I think
how many sketches did we reject for that exact reason when we were doing that, Chris? Dozens, hundreds.
Yeah, for sure. And you're absolutely right about. I think that lie detector scene is almost the biggest example of that. Of needing an end point. Yeah. Even if we see him ask, "Are you living together?" But they kind of don't really do any. We don't see that moment, and then they don't really do anything with Jack having that information. On the sketch thing, I will say the reason I don't think the movie falls into that trap as much as other movies is, for example, the sketch that ends in him burning down the altar.
Yes.
Well, we know why that's going to be a disaster. We know what that means. The altar in its meaning has been planted. Anything to do with the cat disappearing, again, we know how much he loves the cat. Like, they are planting the seeds of all of it for those big set pieces, which compared to some comedies of the time and of now, is like fucking ace. Like, at least you've tried, and arguably successfully. But
and I will say actually, this movie is really good at casually laying information that becomes relevant later in ways that you don't necessarily think is gonna, you know what I mean? Like, when we're doing the scene when he is explaining how he trained the cat to use the toilet, what we're actually setting up is the joke later when the cat goes to the toilet in the ashes. Because the cat's always looking for litter that it no longer can find because he removed it. But in the scene where we explore that, we're sort of, as an audience, because it's kind of double meaning, you don't spot the Chekhov's gun being laid there of a cat looking for things to poop in or pee in, whatever, So instead you're seeing it as a scene of just sort of revealing something kind of strange about Jack, but also his relationship to this animal, and also that this animal is highly trained. And it's like, all of that stuff is what you're taking in, that you miss the planting of the actual, not the actual, because a lot of that stuff does end up being used for different reasons, but there's so much stuff being planted so subtly and so well inside of otherwise innocuous scenes where you could just go, well, we're just learning about the character, and all of it comes back constantly. And that's just one example. The movie is dropping everything from his suitcase not arriving to the cigarettes being thrown on the roof early in the movie. There's just tons of these things being planted throughout that all ramp up and pay off as it goes. And like it doesn't waste a word, this movie, to its credit. Like, a lot of its choices, everything that happens is very deliberate. Every line of dialogue, every physical thing that happens is going to set something up later, for sure. And the only arguable exception, and the reason maybe even you thought there would be some sort of payoff to it, was the nicotine gum. And that's because the movie sort of teaches you that everything is going to sort of come back and bite Greg on the ass. And that's the one thing that doesn't. But again, as we said, that sort of works as a character thing. So,
arguably, there's the implication that it's the nicotine gum that gives the cat the shits and leads to the cat shitting in the wedding dress. I suppose
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, there's the there's the shot of all the nicotine gum everywhere, suggesting he ate it and evidently went on an absolute bender and rampage as a result.
Yeah. So look, even that comes back. So it's the movie is very, very meticulous, laying groundwork for the chaos that's to ensue. So, one tiny little criticism. Can we just a little shuffle to nitpick corner for 1 second, Chris? We're close to it after doing all of the Jurassic Park movies. It's we live adjacent to nitpick corner right now. I would say, if we're going to have the line where Pam says he's a human lie detector, and then have him approach his son and be like, "Is this your pot pipe?" and the son go, "No, it's Greg's," and him to just believe him, it does undermine that point somewhat.
That is probably that character in a way is probably, because I think that point applies to a wider point, which is that actually arguably a flaw of the movie is everything you have. Like, what is he just like? Does he just literally love his daughters more? Like, everything the movie wants you to believe about Jack, his relationship with Danny is insane. Even to the point of how Danny's room looked. I was like, but I don't buy that Jack would be okay with. Like, do you know what like he's got like drugs just hidden in his pocket. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like the scenario we're expected to believe Jack has cultivated. How is that kid not like, well, he didn't want a boy, he wanted a cat. Like, it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, their relationship, really. And I'm not sure the movie does enough to justify why he's so different in terms of what Danny gets away with comparatively.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would agree. It's kind of strange.
Because even at the end, which is a pointless sequence, but even at the end, where we see the hidden camera footage,
yeah.
and Greg says about Danny smoking pot, Jack's character doesn't really react. Like, he doesn't look annoyed. Like, it's weird.
Yeah, we should talk about that scene briefly. You're right. It's like very disconnected from the movie. You almost feel like it was supposed to play with the credits, but instead they chose to just play it, then do the credits. It's a weird tag. It is kind of funny. It is a funny scene, but it does feel really strangely outside of the movie, doesn't it?
Mm. Like, yeah, it absolutely does. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's a bizarre scene. Although I do, one thing I do like about that scene though is Robert De Niro is this is clearly post the movie, the end of the movie. We're in sequence here, and Robert De Niro gives a brilliant performance here as Jack, because earlier in the movie he would have furrowed his brow and he'd have been really angry at this. He's sort of smirking. He looks amused by it and slightly charmed by it in this scene, which tells us, I guess, that he has softened on Greg and his weirdness and like sort of accepted him as he is.
Yeah, well, especially when he's like, "That's my son-in-law" to the cat or whatever.
Yeah. Which he sort of says like, "That's my son-in-law," but like also like he's exasperated, but he's like, there's just like a mild, like you can just a mild bit of just a tiny bit of affection creeps in, and I just that's again just the amazing work of Robert De Niro. Shock horror, everyone! Robert De Niro is a good actor. I know.
Who the fuck knew?
You fucking liars, a lot of you. We haven't talked about it, but the volleyball scene is so predictable, as is the bubbly smashing the urn. But Christ on a stick, is it effective? It's when he hits that ball after all of that pressure. And in fact, that volleyball scene demonstrates the problem with the whole movie, because it's Jack that's like, you're not doing good enough at volleyball. He's pressuring him, he's yelling at him, he's getting mad at him for not being good at volleyball. So of course he gets the chance to spike it, and he keeps telling him, spike it. And of course it hits the bride right in the face. It's like it's that anxiety dream thing of the worst possible case scenario of how can this person ruin the weekend more, but it's not even really his fault.
Again, though, it's the subtlety that I just love. And again, some of it might be improvised or it's in the script. I don't know, but it's the fact that as they're crowding around her and stuff, you hear the other dad or the other older gentleman who's been hounding him just as much as Jack. Like, I think he even calls him. He calls him something derogatory to do with him being a nurse, like in the huddle and stuff, like Florence Nightingale, I think he calls him, or something.
Yeah.
As derogatory as in he means it derogatory, obviously. But then as they crowd around this Pam's sister, you just hear him go, "It's only a game, fucker."
Yeah, it's great. That's so good. I'm going to assume that line was written, but if it wasn't, credit to that actor for that ad lib, because fuck me, it's great. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's perfect. It ramps up the tension. It isolates Greg. It's a good scene. And very quickly, I just looked. I wrote it down. It was 18 minutes left of the movie when he gets kicked out of the house after the cat ruins the dress. 18 minutes left of the movie. It's crazy.
I also think they do a good job of justifying, because they've made things go so wrong to such a point that you're like, well, presumably the wedding's cancelled. But to be fair, we see the cesspool being drained. We see them trying to cut down the trees and get rid of what's been burnt. And then she's not wearing a dress and her eyes better. Like, you do buy at the end. You're like, oh, yeah.
It's even better than that, actually, with her eye. We see her, if you watch her face through the next couple of scenes, trying different makeup to cover it up.
Ah, okay.
So, like, there's a scene where they're like putting on really heavy makeup, and you see her with really heavy makeup that's a bit too obvious, covering the bruise, but her eye is still really closed. Like, so it looks kind of funny. So, like, there's an implication that they're experimenting with ways to cover it for the wedding. Again, subtly done. You know, the more we talk about it, the more I'm thinking maybe this film is better than we gave it credit for in our opening. Maybe this is just a good movie and not just like a fine movie. Because we're finding a lot to compliment, and we're not really finding a lot to criticize.
Yeah, I don't think we've really criticized anything, have we?
No, I think third act's a bit quick, but it sort of gets away with it. You know.
Yeah, and I didn't particularly agree with you on that. So it's not even like that's a resounding categorical criticism. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
And they could have done more. And like I say, I'm willing to bet the sequels fall into this trap. Absolutely, there's a way worse version of this movie that's like, hey, look at this, Robert De Niro doing a comedy, because I don't know at the time how much comedy he'd done.
He'd done one. He'd done Analyze This or Analyze That, whichever one came first.
Right, okay. Right, so, but do you know what I mean? I remember that being a thing at the time. I remember part of the thing of this was, we've got this incredible actor and he's doing a comedy. And to be fair, they don't... Do you know what I mean? A lesser version of this movie has him turn to Greg at one point and say, you talking to me? Like, do you know what I mean? And they don't do that. So fair play to them for the restraint there.
Yeah. The other thing I will say, just in terms of the comedy very quickly, because I just found this note and I remembered I need to bring this up. The thing with the plane, before he's on the plane, when she won't check him, because they're currently only doing up to rows 10, and he's just the only one stood there, and they stand there awkwardly, and then she picks up the phone to announce to an empty room they're now checking everyone else, and it's just him, and it cuts to this incredible over-the-shoulder shot to reveal the whole room with him just awkwardly stood there. That sequence is one of my favourites in the whole movie. It's so funny.
It's very funny, but again, it's slightly having their cake and eating it. Like,
right.
My first interpretation of that when I was younger was that was Jack holding up the plane and holding up him getting on the plane. But it doesn't play like that. It just plays like they're just showing that he's right to blow up because the situation in his life is getting more and more ridiculous. You know, that's a sort of planes, trains, automobiles type scene, isn't it? Like at that point.
Yes.
But again, it's not. You could go, oh, she's been told she can't check him in or needs to delay him by higher up. But just the rest of it doesn't play out that way. So yeah.
One other quick thing, and this is I don't know how I feel, so I'm going to ask you the question. Do you feel like, in terms of Pam, and this is my last point before we can just move on to the trivia, unless you've got any sort of overall stuff. Well, we should do overall just thoughts, I guess. But but do you feel like Pam undermines her trust of Greg by going to his parents to get the test scores or not? Because if she truly believed him, she wouldn't need to see those, right?
I didn't interpret it as she didn't believe him. I interpreted it as she only ever got that to show her dad. To show Jack.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Especially because of the note on it, which is like, hope this helps, 99%, 97%. Like, it just reads as, oh, can I just have a copy of this because I just want to show someone, or, oh, can I just have a copy of this? So I didn't read it personally as she didn't believe him.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think she's mad at her dad.
Yeah. Although if she's mad at her dad, she does let she does let Greg walk away while she's in the arms of her dad, like very much sort of on his side.
True, but I think the trouble is by that point, and I think they could do more. Maybe I'm fansplaining slightly. They could do more to say this in the movie. But there's an element, by that point, his actions have been so insane and caused so much chaos that she lets him go because she's just rendered speechless by it all. But then when she reflects on it, she realises that was a mistake. And to be fair, it kind of is in the movie because she then phones him. She then phones him and says, look, I love you. You know, she doesn't say I believe as overtly as I shouldn't have let you walk away, but that's kind of the vibe.
Yeah, that's implied. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, I think like solid movie, man. Maybe not one you'll come away from just like effusively like everyone must see this movie, but a good movie. I think we've struggled to criticize it. I think it's a great film.
I think this happens sometimes. It happens very rarely, but it does happen sometimes where analysing it deeply benefits the movie because you go, actually, you know what? There's nothing really to criticise. So it definitely, whilst there's nothing that's, you know, outstanding, we've not sat here and gone, this character arc is played out brilliantly. We've mainly praised a combination of the script and actors, which I suspect is where that comedy and that subtlety comes from. Mm-hmm. That's the closest thing to this is phenomenal. But, you know, that doesn't mean that it, you know, is going to be the best movie we've reviewed this year. But it's definitely not a bad movie. And after deeper analysis, not particularly a flawed movie. At least, that we've discovered over the conversation.
Yeah, no, it holds up surprisingly well to scrutiny. Yeah, fascinating. But here we are. All right, should we do some triv, Chris? You want to do some triv?
Let's do it, big boy. I don't know why I called you big boy.
The thing is, for a second, I was like gonna, call you out on that, and I thought, no, he knows. He knows.
But just like I never would have meant like I didn't mean like big like. No, but
I just mean that didn't work. Like in your heart of heart that didn't feel right for whatever reason.
Yes, yeah.
You didn't pull that off. We all do.
Yes, yeah, that's fair.
You can do the thing.
Oh, let's trim it up.
Jesus Christ! I'm gonna give you some trivia, Florence Nightingale. See, didn't work. I acknowledge it. Right, let's do this. So, despite the film coming out in the year 2000, its development starts in 1991.
Because 1991? Jesus.
Because this movie is actually a remake of an independent film from 1991 called Meet the Parents. It's a 75-minute film starring Greg Gilena and Mary Ruth Clark, who wrote the script. He also directed the film on a budget of about $100,000. It's sort of a Clerks-esque affair in that sense. It's a very, small budget movie that was then screened at a lot of festivals. I saw a clip of it online in my research, and it looks very, very cheap. But apparently, it's one of the funniest movies. Like, it was voted multiple times one of the funniest movies ever made, or whatever, one of the funniest independent movies ever made. So maybe it's great. It looked okay. It definitely, its budget was clear. To be honest, that was the harder part. It was very cheaply shot. But hey, if the jokes and the characters work, the jokes and the characters work. It feels very. The scene I saw feels very sort of like indie movie where like so one of the jokes is that he goes to cut, like the mother has produced this beautiful like roast meat, and he goes to like tip it up to cut it, and it slides straight off the plate and hits the floor, and the cat starts eating it. And then there's just like what felt like an eternity of just everyone sort of staring at each other awkwardly, like no one's saying anything, just like sitting in the awkwardness of that before the mother's like, vegetables, which is good, but it is it holds on it so long. Like a Hollywood movie would never make that choice. But I guess the tension ramps up because of it. So I don't know. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's masterpiece. I'm not sure. But it's certainly interesting to look at. If anyone wants to dig out clips or footage of that film, if you're interested, it's probably worth seeing. But basically,
to be fair, I'd argue the closest thing I've seen a Hollywood movie do to that is the dinner scene in this, and the amount of time that goes on for.
Yeah, that's fair. This is the point in which the first of two famous directors called Steven get involved with this project, because Steven Soderbergh liked the independent film and wanted to do like a remake of it. So he took the idea to Universal, who initially declined, but eventually, a few years later, optioned the film for Soderbergh to direct in 1995. But unfortunately, he had to drop out because he got involved in a film called Out of Sight. Now, Universal, not wanting to waste the money they'd just spent, optioning the original, getting the rights to it, they basically turned to a guy called Jim Hertzfield to write this adaptation. Now, he completed his first draft in 1996 and presented the script to Jay Roach. He had just finished directing Austin Powers. I don't think it had actually come out yet, but he'd made it. And he really loved the script and wanted this to be his next film. But the studio was super skeptical of his ability to direct something less cartoony and more character-driven. Plus, a different famous director called Steven, by the name of Steven Spielberg, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, had caught wind of this script and became interested in making this movie. Sorry, I just noticed something really interesting has happened here. At some point there's been some weird copy-paste or like find-replace error, because it says John Hertzfield is the guy who wrote it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. There's a typo there. But I've just noticed just under it, it says Jum Carrey instead of Jim Carrey. So there's been some sort of find-replace error at some point with the letter I and the letter U. Anyway. Well, that's just a massive coincidence. So Spielberg's version of the film starred Jim Carrey and Al Pacino. So the script started getting reworked at this stage in order to accommodate more physical comedy. So they kept Hertzfield on to sort of ramp up the physical comedy. And Jim Carrey even was starting to contribute jokes to the screenplay. He actually was the one who brought the name Fokker into the script. That was his idea.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, it really doesn't. Now, reportedly, Jim Carrey and Steven Spielberg ultimately had to drop out because of how long it was taking to develop and get off the ground. Because obviously this was all like from 91 to like 95. There's a script by 96. It's just taking a long time, basically. And they want to move on. So Jim Carrey ultimately moves on and goes and makes Me, Myself, and Irene and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and Spielberg moves on to go make AI. Carrey, though, has later stated that, Ben Stiller, who had obviously directed him previously in The Cable Guy, actually was a much better choice for the role, and he's glad it worked out the way it did. So it's very classy, very nice thing for Jim Carrey to have said. He's right.
I would agree with that. I don't think this role needs Jim Carrey's physicality.
No, I 100% agree. Yeah, it's not that kind of movie. What's good about this movie is that it's not that kind of movie, truthfully. It's a character-driven comedy, and that's like probably was quite refreshing at this time and place. So once Carrey leaves the project, once Carrey and Spielberg leave the project, the studio do turn back to Roach. Is it Jay Roach? What's the guy's full name? I've written Roach here, which just feels disrespectful. I don't know the guy. Can't you? Oh yeah, they turn back to Roach. Doesn't feel right. Let me see. What's the actual? Is it Jay? I think it's Jay. Jay Roach. I got it right. I didn't need to overthink that. And once the film,
I mean, yeah, especially as like you've been calling Spielberg, like like it's fine. Like that's...
Wait, what? What was that last one?
Like, you've been calling Spielberg. Like, I think it's fine to call him Roach. Like, that's just, often directors will get referred to by their surname.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So Roach comes back into the picture after working on, I think at this point now he might have finished Austin Powers 2 by the time this comes back to him. That's how long this movie took to develop. But he started working on the film, and it's sort of starting to shift into the film we know today. They brought on another writer to sort of Jim Carrey the script. That's when... So there's Jim Hertzfield as the original writer, and then there is John Hamburg. John Hamburg comes in at this point to sort of take out some of the physical stuff. Some of the other names considered potentially for the lead, Ben Stiller's role, before they signed Ben Stiller, is Rob Schneider, Martin Lawrence, Adam Sandler, Eddie Murphy, and Mike Myers. I think almost all of those guys have the same problem as Jim Carrey, with the maybe exception of Adam Sandler.
Yeah,
but is
Martin
that
Lawrence
informed
maybe
by...
could...
Yeah, I thought about that too. Martin Lawrence is also potentially a good choice. You still there?
Yeah, no, I agree. I went Martin Lawrence, and you were like, yeah, Martin Lawrence is a good choice. Yeah, I suppose you're right. It was my turn to talk, but I couldn't think of an add-on other than repeating that.
I thought Martin. I just want to make sure we hadn't lost each other. I was like staring into the sides, like, shit. Have we disconnected? Because that sometimes happens.
That was literally me going, I don't know what to do there because it's my turn to talk, but I don't, you know. Just a table tennis of Martin Lawrence compliments.
Yeah. No, you're right, because he's a sort of, the only problem, not problem, but I think it would change the potential implications of the script if, assuming that we're the rest of the cast ends up the same, but Martin Lawrence comes in, it could, I think, then be interpreted as a she's brought home a black boyfriend and her dad's not happy about it movie, which that's a story too, I think, that could be told, but it just doesn't seem like that's what this movie is, and I feel like you wouldn't necessarily want to muddle that message. So I guess if you want to do it with Martin Lawrence, you'd probably have to recast the rest of the movie too, so that you know that, so that's not the point of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense.
Yeah, because I just don't think you'd want to muddy the two, because it just feels like that would be a thing. But anyway, Adam Sandler. But I was thinking with Adam Sandler also. I think that's because I've seen some of his more recent work. I think at the time, Adam Sandler was purely known for his bigger comedic roles. You know, doing the silly voice and all that stuff. And I don't know if that plays. I don't know if that plays as well. Other options for Jack were Christopher Walken, Anthony Hopkins, Harrison Ford, and Alan Alda.
See that's almost the opposite. All of those, probably not as well as Robert De Niro, because of what Robert De Niro brings to the role, being Robert De Niro. But all of those could have done it. Harrison Ford could have done it. Alan Alda could have done it.
Yeah. Maybe the only one I would be like a bit skeptical, Christopher Walken. I don't know if is intimidating enough. Maybe at that time though, he doesn't. Yeah, he did used to do roles where he was the bad guy. I don't know. But funnily enough, it was actually the studio that had suggested De Niro for the part, because he'd just done Analyze This, which was a comedy, and he was pursuing comedic roles at the time. So that's how that ended up happening. It was actually Jay Roach that saw the film as an anxiety dream and felt nobody could play that material better than Ben Stiller. So that's good. So yeah, that's how we ended up with our cast. Apparently the male nurse idea was Ben Stiller's. I'm going to assume, I'm just going to assume good intent there, and it just being a thing to make Greg a more sympathetic character, because he's just doing what makes him happy. So yeah. The idea to use the lie detector test came from Robert De Niro, because he was researching the role and knew that the character was a CIA guy, was reading up on polygraphs, and presented this to Jay Roach at a pre-shoot dinner. At that point, there was no lie detector scene in the script, Roach told Entertainment Weekly. But after hearing all this, I thought, oh, that has to be in our movie.
And now it's become really the iconic thing from it.
Oh yeah, that's the
poster.
That's the next thing he says, and now it's become the central image of all the ads, trailers, and everything. So you're exactly right. In terms of Pam, right? Like we got a little bit. I don't know what to do with this. So just first of all, two other potential options were Christina Ricci and Julia Stiles. They both auditioned, but didn't do it for various reasons. Both would have been good. Yeah, they're both very talented actresses. This one I struggle with a bit because the backstory to this isn't fun. So Naomi Watts did callbacks and got close to landing the role. She did like multiple callbacks, so she was really in the running. So she ultimately lost the role to Terry Polo, and the filmmakers stated that Terry Polo won the role as a result of her sarcastic edge. They thought that worked better for the character. And based on what's in the film, I agree with that. And I assume that makes sense to you as well, Chris.
I don't think she's that sarcastic as a character. That's why I made that little noise. But yeah, I guess maybe. I suppose actually we complimented the your milking days and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, no, I suppose that is fair. Yeah, that's fair.
The thing is, when Naomi Watts was speaking to Entertainment Weekly in 2006, she said that she was told at the time she didn't get the role because they didn't think she was sexy enough.
Ooh,
now,
God.
First of all, that's, pretty insane. For, like, the obvious reasons of, like, why would they tell her that? Even if that was true, right? Even if they had...
I'm really worried about where you were going there. I really thought you were going... First of all, that's insane. For the obvious reasons that... She's fit as hell. It really sounded like that's where you were going. Okay. Which she's a very attractive woman. That is also true. But really,
no, that wasn't where I was going.
The sincerity of which you were talking was.
Yeah, sorry, no. I was pausing to make sure I phrased it correctly. But it's crazy to me. Because I didn't want to make it sound like I was going, it would have been fine for them to think that as long as they didn't tell her. I didn't want that to be the implication of what I was saying, so I probably paused to be careful about how I phrased it. But it is insane they told her that. Just outright. Why would you say that to someone? But that's number one. Number two, obviously, that's a crazy criteria for... I mean, look, I understand Hollywood movies, big budget TV shows, they lean towards more attractive people. That's you'd be foolish to not think that how someone looks is not a factor when casting them, right? Whether that be you think the character, shouldn't or should be a certain level of handsomeness for the storyline reasons. I have talked recently on our other podcast. We said we wouldn't talk about this, but just very quickly, the casting of Snape in the new Harry Potter thing. My complaint was he's too handsome, right? So sometimes people's attractiveness it can impact the character. Because it's hard to believe that character wouldn't, would have been this sort of snivelling outcast if he was this handsome man, right? That's just I'm looking at the wider thing of the character and thinking maybe we shouldn't have gone quite so attractive. But the other side of that as well is obviously, we look to put attractive people in our movies and TV shows. We have always done that from a Hollywood perspective. But... the acting has to come first, surely. And
yeah, it's mad.
It's not like, I just don't understand. I don't understand why that would be a factor in the choice. I don't understand why they would tell her that. I don't. Brutal, awful, and I hope that she's got on the wrong end of the stick or she's misheard something. I hope that's not what the thinking was, because if that is, then the filmmakers should be deeply ashamed of themselves, because that's horrible, both to think and say. Basically, that's what I'm coming down to on this. Madness.
Yeah, it's horrendous. It's absolute madness.
Yeah, I don't know, man. So yeah. Anyway, shall we move on? We got a few other tiny bits of trivia before we get there. So let's talk about the production. So Robert De Niro, ever the method actor, chose to keep a distance from Ben Stiller during the shoot to maintain an aloofness between the two men.
Imagine being like, imagine if you're Ben Stiller. Yeah. I'm working with Robert De Niro. He doesn't want to speak to me. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Brutal. And this is one of a few forced method acting things that happened to poor Ben Stiller, because Jay Roach tried to keep him off balance by not letting him know if Robert De Niro was liking his work.
Fucking hell.
Also, Ben Stiller hated all the clothes he wore in his film, but Jay Roach said it was part of the plan to keep Stiller as uncomfortable as possible when filming scenes as Greg. So here's my thing on this, right? I think method acting is bollocks. I think anyone who does it is a fucking idiot. Like, I just think you're a moron. I just think it's so stupid. Laurence Olivier, have you tried acting? Why haven't you tried acting? I don't think you should need to do that personally, and I think anyone who does is I don't know. I just think it's dumb. I just think it's really dumb, especially if it inconveniences anyone around you. I think if you want to do an approach for method acting that doesn't impact any human around you at all, then I guess I can go for it. But when you've got like Daniel Day-Lewis on like the set where his character couldn't walk, asking people to sort of carry him to the bathroom because he wouldn't walk between takes because his character couldn't walk.
Yeah, or the obvious Man on the Moon and
yeah, the Jim Carrey one, which he has apologized for. He said he was obnoxious on that set and all that stuff, but like not good enough. All of that stuff. I hate all of that. Right, Robert De Niro in this movie is doing a bit of method acting. Kept his distance from Ben Stiller. That's unfortunate. But, he's choosing that for himself, right? Jay Roach forcing Ben Stiller into a sort of method acting process by being mean to him, essentially, and making him uncomfortable deliberately and not telling him if Robert De Niro is happy with his performance just feels cruel. And that's not his choice. Let him act his process. Let him do it his way. Don't deliberately make him feel uncomfortable. It's the same when you hear about Kubrick making actors do hundreds of takes to exhaust them. Stop it. Let's not do this. Come on. Let them act.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, just a little side note, Ben Stiller flew out to Los Angeles to propose to Christine Taylor while shooting this film. She thought he was still in New York filming, and he surprised her at home with a path of candles and rose petals. I think that's delightful, and I'm glad he was able to get out of shooting to go do that.
I think they're still together now, aren't they?
Yeah, I believe so. I didn't double check that. Probably should have, but yeah.
Both very good in the season of Curb that they're in.
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten about that. Yes, very good. Good stuff. So according to the DVD commentary, the car chase scene was originally going to be a spoof of Ronin and be a proper car chase. But when the filmmakers got to the location, they saw how quickly the lights changed and realised it will be much funnier and rewrote the entire scene because the lights really did change from green to red as fast as they're shown in the movie, meaning you only ever get to go a little bit before you stop again.
I liked about how that scene changes and becomes, because at first I'm like, is this going on too long? But I love how well they change it from he's at the start of that car chase, he's just rushing to get home, and then it just becomes about beating Jack.
Yes, yeah.
And for both of them as well, like for Jack, he's trying to rush home to prove Greg wrong, and then it just becomes about beating him. Like, it's great.
Yeah, I agree. Fully agree. So Mr. Jinx is a Himalayan cat, a breed famed for its difficulty to be trained. The trainers begged director Jay Roach to choose another cat, any kind of cat, but he really liked how the Himalayan cat looked. So since these cats were
great.
It is a great cat, and it's very distinct, which helps the movie with its it's feeling iconic in many ways. So since these cats are very temperamental, the filmmakers had a backup cat on set at all times in case one would not cooperate. Now, this is the most delightful. I love this so much. So Robert De Niro originally wanted to train the cat himself. It's my favorite thing ever. But he realized it would take up several months of his life. So instead, he carried kibble in all of his pockets at all times in this movie, which helped him enjoy a very cooperative relationship with the cat. In fact, he liked the cat so much, he would request Mr. Jinx to appear in scenes that he wasn't originally supposed to in the script, just so he could play with him more and between takes.
Phenomenal. Great stuff.
Love that. To move on to some more general trivia, this one's one of my favourites. The MPAA would not allow them to use the name Fokker in this movie, unless the filmmakers could find and prove that an actual person existed on the planet with that surname.
And did the well? That must mean that they did then.
Yeah, it doesn't say that, but that is the implication of that trivia. Someone out there's surname is Fokker. Apparently, as well, they had to do some minor reshoots on this movie because people weren't pronouncing Fokker consistently at all throughout the movie. There's a lot of Fuka and other ways of pronouncing it. So ultimately, they had to go back and do a few reshoots to get, or like ad libs, like ADR, to get Fokker right.
Oh, I think it would have added to it if everyone had pronounced it slightly differently and wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Would have been okay with that.
Yeah, I would have been too, actually. That's a good point. When Jack first questions Greg, he mentions he spent 19 months in a Vietnamese prison and that made him a patient man, but this is a direct reference to The Deer Hunter, where Robert De Niro's character spends time in a Vietnamese prison camp. That's just fun. So this one's interesting. Greg's prayer... prayer, I said that very wrong. Greg's prayer is made up of lyrics of the song Day by Day from the award-winning musical Godspell, which is fine. It's a funny joke. But what I didn't notice is that song is apparently playing over the speakers in the store in the very previous scene, implying where he got the idea to steal it from, which is, I think, genius.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah. To move on to a slightly sadder fact, the actress who plays Pam's sister, Deborah, sadly passed away in 2005. I think she's very good in this movie. She doesn't have a lot to do, but she's good at what she is doing.
Yeah.
She got name-checked in Meet the Fockers, but didn't appear, which is a shame because obviously that one came out in like 2004, so a year before she died. So theoretically, she could have been in that one, but they obviously just didn't find a storyline reason for her. And it's not like they knew she was going to pass away the year after. And then obviously she's completely absent from Little Fockers because, again, at that point she had passed away. But salute Deborah Barnes. She does a good job.
Yeah, she does a really good job in this film.
Yeah. When Jack first meets Greg and asks him to choose, to pay her more of a compliment, she does a really good job, and actually she's got quite an important job, which is part of the madness of this needs to be sold on her reactions, and she doesn't have a lot of screen time to get out and see the state of the garden and react. Be all dazed after getting hit by the ball, but this is her wedding day that's being destroyed, and actually it's quite important to the plot that she sells like how traumatic this is for her, and she does a wonderful job doing that. So yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I respect to her,
and her reaction to getting spiked by the volleyball is really good as well. She has a proper she it's like it's one of those reactions that you feel the pain and it doesn't even look that painful, but because of a strong performance of feeling the pain, like her sort of screams of anguish, whatever you want to describe it as, you do buy it, and that does help sell that scene. So yeah, good work. She did a good job. It's a shame. Very sad to hear that she passed away. When Jack first meets Greg and asks him if he chose green as his car color, Greg answers no, and Jack says, "Well, that's interesting because geniuses typically tend to pick green, but you didn't pick it." That whole line. Apparently, if you look behind Jack, you can see the shutters of the house are green. He also has many green and olive coloured clothes throughout the movie, implying that he believes that that piece of information.
That's good. That's a nice character touch.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So let's talk about box office, Chris, before we wrap this bad boy up. So this had a $55 million budget. And I assume you can probably predict from the fact there were two sequels that it did quite well. $330 million worldwide, which for a comedy is very impressive. And again, a $55 million budget. I mean, let's be honest, with marketing, it probably cost just over $100 million. So I would say there's probably about $200 million profit here.
Wow.
We're sort of estimating that because obviously you never know the marketing, but very few films we've ever been able to talk about the actual categorical what the marketing budget was. In fact, the only example I can think of is Jurassic Park, the first one, where we happened to find out that figure. But it's usually about double the budget. So yeah, 55 million, let's say 110 total, made 330. So over $200 million profit for the studio.
I wonder if, do we know offhand? Although I think I looked it up yesterday. I think even Little Fockers is quite consistent with that.
Is that, you know what? I actually didn't look that up. I feel like I usually would look that up. But let's do a little bit of.
So according to the Wikipedia, the budget was 100 million and the box office was 310 million
for Little Fockers.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Let's just double check that with because Box Office Mojo tends to be a little stricter on what money it counts. Yeah, so Box Office Mojo has the budget at 100 million. Which is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, that is what you said. Okay, yeah, and 310. What about Meet the Fockers? Wow, so that's probably... although, to be fair, okay, so with Little Fockers, though, if we're doubling the budget, that only made 100 million profit. Only, but you know what I mean? That is a smaller profit. Let's see Meet the Fockers. Wow. Holy shit. Okay, sorry. The most profitable movie in this franchise is Meet the Fockers, which had an 80 million budget, but made 522 million at the box office.
Fair play to it.
Holy hell.
They could easily bring this franchise back, couldn't they, I reckon?
Yeah, I think what you do is you wait just a couple more years. Let Ben Ben Stiller's gone grey now. And I think what you do now is you have because he has twins, right, in the next movie. I've not seen it, but from the trailer, they have twins, don't they?
I can't remember.
So one of those twins brings back their new partner to Ben Stiller, and he's now in the Jack role.
Well, you could. Wouldn't it be fun to have him? Like they bring him back, they stay round. He doesn't like him, and then they're like, "So what do we do this weekend?" And Ben Stiller's character's like, "Let's go visit your granddad." The notion is that he's teaming up with Jack.
Sure. Yeah, to bring the guy down. Yeah, great. Do it. Yeah, I think that's fun. You could do that. It'd be a good movie, I think.
Yeah.
You definitely could do that. So, but yeah, look.
Someone get Zac Efron on the phone. Is Zac Efron still young enough to? He's probably not, is he? He's not young enough to play the boyfriend, is he?
No,
is
he'd have done that back in the day, but not now. I mean, what's he now? He's my age. He's pushing 40.
Who do you get then? I'm sure there's someone.
No, you know who you get? Pete Davidson.
Tell me. Oh, God. Jeez.
I'm right, though.
Could Pete Davidson bring the heart? He probably could, couldn't he?
Because he's the sort of person that you could imagine if you brought him home as your partner. Your parents taking a look at him and judging, maybe.
There's Why Him, isn't there? Which I've never seen, which is a very similar premise. Like, isn't that Bryan Cranston and James Franco?
Yeah, maybe. Is he in that movie too?
No, I don't think so. I just saying it's a similar. I'm just realizing that it's a similar premise to Meet the Parents, isn't it? Yeah. But then again, I suppose it's a fairly classic premise.
Yeah, it's like it's a universal thing, isn't it? Trying to get the praise of the future in-laws. Anyway, look, there's probably a myriad of people that could do that. But that there's definitely a movie in that for sure. And look, the last one still turned a profit. It didn't turn a huge profit because of that budget. So 100 million. If we're doing 200 million for marketing, if we're including marketing, it only turned 100 million profit, which again is obviously a huge amount of money. But in movie terms, especially considering the previous one, brought in 300-400 million profit, even accounting for marketing. It's kind of, that is a drop for Little Fockers, but still, there's juice in this franchise yet. I feel for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's have a look. Oh yeah, everyone's favorite segment, Chris. It's Cars Exist. Oh, yours is. You're good at that. You've got. I mean, I don't know if you. I can't remember if you were like outright good at that from minute one, but you've either developed, or you were just good at it from the start. But your car noise is always good.
It's going to start being my answer because people are always asking me. Because for wide context here, never been able to drive. Learned to drive recently. Have no confidence. Terrifies me. Don't drive that often. And like I would say every 2 or 3 days, someone says to me, "Oh, how's your driving going?" And I might now start going. I do a really good impression of a car on a podcast I do. Because otherwise, my answer is always the fucking same, which is, yeah, should do more of it.
That's very funny. Hey man, you passed your test. You're good. They don't pass people for nothing.
Yeah. Well,
you didn't accidentally acquire a driving license. That test exists for a reason, but
no, but I think it does say a lot that my instructor, who was in the back, thought I'd failed. And her she is. I am not. Do I say this? Because I don't want it to sound critical. Because I adore her. Yeah, no, I won't say. I'll add a caveat to that. But if I add the caveat off air, you'll go, "That's really funny. You absolutely should have said that on the podcast." All right, I'll say it. She's a really, really lovely woman. Lovely woman, my instructor. And she, and she's a really, really lovely woman, and she's very religious, and I don't think this is the comfort she thought it was. When at the end she said she thought I'd failed, when I said, "Oh, well, if you thought I'd failed, do you think maybe they shouldn't have passed me?" Her response of, "Well, it seems like God wanted you to pass," isn't necessarily the comfort in my driving ability that she maybe thought it was.
So, yeah. You know what? I'm going to start. I think I might have to turn to religion, Chris, because I think that's amazing. Your podcast is really shit. If God didn't want me to podcast, he'd have taken it away from me already.
It was just, it wasn't the your skills. It wasn't necessarily. So yeah, there we go.
Good. All right, let me do
where we were. You were naming some cars.
Yeah, cars exist. So Greg's rental car is a 2000 Ford Taurus. Now I got excited because obviously the Ford Taurus show is our old friend JJ_John_Johnny's favourite car.
Yes, when I heard Taurus name checked, I got excited too.
Yeah. Sadly, the Ford Taurus SE is different from the Taurus show very significantly, and there is no comment, no feedback from J_John_Johnny. For those who don't know, I should very briefly explain that, because otherwise it's a really innocuous thing I've just said. Cars Exist is kind of like a weird thing that happened, because on IMDb sometimes they just list the model of the cars in the movie as if that's of interest. And I found that funny, so we started doing it as a premise, like Cars Exist. But then there were movies that didn't have that in the trivia, so I had to go to this website called the Internet Movie Car Database, where I then could find what the models of the cars were to do this bit that I've locked myself into doing forever. And we found that whenever a Ford Taurus show came up, there was a comment from this guy JJ_John_Johnny, who's our hero, who just loves that car and comments on every single movie that car appears in, and it sort of clarifies which model, which year, because he just knows that car intimately. He's my fucking hero. I love him. Everyone should have a hobby and be as passionate about anything. You get you a partner that looks at you the way J_John_Johnny looks at a Ford Taurus show. Anyway, he didn't. It was a Ford Taurus SE, so I got excited, but it's not the same car. Revealing my own lack of understanding of these cars. Kevin's pickup is a 1949 Chevrolet 4100, and Jack's car is a 1998 Lincoln Continental, which is just a fun word to say. Dr. Bob Banks' car, which Greg drives to try to beat Jack to the house, is a 2000 Mercedes-Benz S500 W220. That's the car that he's like, I've never driven a Mercedes, and he jumps in it. It's a good little scene. I like that. We haven't talked about this very quickly. The way he gets away with being insistent on driving the car, and he sort of does that subtle mime of drinking, to say, I'm just gonna save him from himself. That's quite funny.
Yeah, very funny. Very funny.
Yeah. And very, very last thing, this was genuinely just in the IMDb trivia. Someone noticed, so burglar alarms exist, I guess, because the burglar alarm at Jack's house is a Magnum alert. Yeah, sorry, I didn't force to let you do a noise. The burglar alarm at Jack's house is a Magnum Alert MA1000E. Sure.
I've just realised another motif they didn't sort of bring back is it would have been nice if there was a scene at the end where to really show the growth of the characters and how their relationship has changed. Mm-hmm. A scene where Jack doesn't hide the code he's entering in front of
that would have been good.
Of Greg.
But I will say with that, I get the impression he'd do that if he was stood next to his own daughter, to be honest.
Yes, yeah, that's fair.
I was never sure if that was just because of Greg or just because he's a psychopath. But there you go, Chris. There you go. So, do you want to hear where we're going next? This ended up being a little bit longer than I anticipated. I thought this would be less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
It is technically less than 2 hours, but yeah.
Well, I know, Dan, because in order to look at the other movies done this series,
I realised what I'd done.
The list. But I will say it did give me time to just have a flick through, and no, I can't find any link between The West Wing and this movie.
Yeah. When you said I'm going to look it up, I thought, oh fuck, I think I typed it in there. That's
all right.
There's another one I typed in, but we already talked about that.
I think your next 3 choices are locked in.
They might be. That's possible.
You've got a choice locked in for next year.
Yes, because so basically,
I know why. Yeah,
yes, yeah. Well, we might as well. We can tell people. I'm. It's not the next film I'm picking, but we are doing Addams Family very soon because that will line up with the release of Wednesday, and I'm definitely picking The Wizard of Oz at the start of the next season because that will line up with the movie Wicked releasing. And last time I saw the first Wicked, I remember thinking I'd love to rewatch Wizard of Oz, but I don't think we were recording a rewind reviews at the time. So, or we'd already decided what films we were covering, and there was no way for me to squeeze it in. And also, release-wise, it would have come out not around one of those things or something like that. So I saved it. So I've sat on that for a little while. So yeah, my next 3 choices are actually locked in. That's fine. No one listens to this podcast like, what are they going to choose? It's but we enjoy the tension of that. But yes, Chris, as you have already discovered, my next film is one of my first indie film loves, true loves. I saw this film multiple times in the cinema. I know there's a lot of films we saw when I was younger, like Donnie Darko, that was my step into independent cinema more so. But my real love of indie film starts in 2005 with Ryan Johnson's Brick. And we will be covering that next week.
Yeah. I've never seen it, but the people in my life that have loved that film. Mm-hmm. I had a friend at school that was obsessed and would constantly mention that film. Mm-hmm. And then I went to uni and you talked about that film in exactly the same way. So
yeah, I think I saw it in theatre at least 4 or 5 times. I remember making a point when I found out it was finally leaving cinemas of going to watch it in its last week. So I saw that film 4 or 5 times in the space of a month or 2. It's
fair play.
Yeah, and I took different people each time. I'm not completely insane. Except for maybe I think the last time I probably did just go just because I was going. But yeah, no, it's one of my for many years. It was the pretentious answer when someone said, "What's your favorite film?" and I didn't just want to be like Star Wars. The answer was Brick.
Nice, fair play.
So yeah, very excited.
I'm excited. I literally know nothing.
Oh, don't read anything about it. Don't look it up. Don't look. Just jump
I
in.
can picture, because of people, you and Will banging on about it. That's my friend from school. I can picture the cover of the DVD, but that is it.
Yes, very exciting. It's a great film, but we'll cover that next week. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. You can get us in all the usual places. We're on Patreon if you want to hear that right now. It's as little as $1 a month gets you access to our Patreon, helps keep the lights on, so to speak. But obviously, there's all the usual ways you can support us by liking, subscribing, telling a friend, just continuing to listen. All that stuff's great. We love you for doing that. But yeah, so that's all. Oh yeah, if you have any thoughts, mail at nothingbutstatic.co.uk. those find us. We don't always reply, but we do always read them. We appreciate that. There's also a YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic.uk, where you can comment on the post of this podcast that we put up there. But that covers everything. Thank you all very much for listening. I'm going to pass over to Chris, who ends this. And notice this week, I'm not saying who puts this out of its misery. Mostly because I'm excited about Brick.
Yeah, and I think what a journey we've been on in Meet the Parents as well.
Yes, agreed. 100% agreed.
My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.